Okay, now that we have our firearm set up from the previous video, what we're going to do is we're going to set up and start working on setting up some of the accessories that came in that pack. So for starters, we're going to do this optic, and hopefully we'll have time to do the red dot as well in the same video. And then in future videos, we will do the forward grip and the suppressor. So to begin, let's go ahead and do our optic here. So we're going to use the one on the Y, and I figured because these are all different, it'll be kind of an example that I could use to show you how to very easily compensate for it using tags. So to begin, let's go to our tutorial folder, and we're going to create a new one called accessories just to kind of match it. Now we want to create a sight. So there are many ways to create basically attachments for your firearm, especially now that we're on version 7. So you don't have to use my classes as a base class, but they're already set up for you if you have the option to do so. So everything's been moved to interfaces, and that'll allow you to really kind of just create anything from an actor and just implement the interface and use it. So the simplest one I can show you would be something like this muzzle device. So we'll go to suppressor. We'll see under interfaces, we had to implement the muzzle interface and the firearm attachments interface. And then for the normal attachments, it also implements the attachment interface. So this is for the attachment system, and this is stuff specific for firearms. So you just go through and you basically make it return what you need. So let's head over to our site here. We'll just load up the attacker. And you can see this one implements a couple more. So we have the normal attachment interface, then we have the procedural anim interface. Now the reason it implements this is because I want you to build, basically by default, you can pick up an optic in your hand and aim with it. You don't need a firearm, so you can pick it up like a rangefinder or a pair of binoculars, that kind of stuff, and use the procedural system alongside it. Then you have the aim interface, which is just basically a bunch of getters. Random target interface, this is only because for the case of adding, well, the scene capture component and having magnified optics, sight interface, so on and so on. So to begin, for simple terms, we're going to use my classes as a base because that's the whole point of them even being there. And then you also get the benefits of they're being driven by C++ and not Blueprint. So we're going to create a new Blueprint class, and we're going to search for the type of sight. So skg site, and name it bp underscore tutorial. And I guess in this case, because it's a scope, we're just going to name it scope instead of sight because we want to do a red dot as well. So we open that on up. We're going to add a static mesh, which is going to represent the optic, and I'm going to make it the root. You don't have to make it the root, but I'm going to. Now we want to search for scope and select the one on the y-axis. Now, by default, yours won't actually look like that. It's because I changed the material. So if I reset the material, oh, that's right. So if I reset the material back, no, what was the default? I want to give you an example on it. So I guess I just search for scope and it'll come up with a lens. Scope lens. Yep, there we go. Okay, so for example, this will come into handy when you play or you try to position the sight socket as well as the, what do you call it? The scene capture component. So right now you can see it's just a glass material. Let's go ahead and change that. So we're going to open it up, change the lens socket. So this is the one for the glass. And we're going to search for sight. And here we'll see material instance underscore set sight socket. And all it is basically a dot. It's a little emissive, so I guess UE5 is kind of picking that up. But it allows for kind of easy placement of the aim socket and again the scene capture. So here we have that. Let's go ahead and add the scene capture. So here you'll see SKG scene capture optic. So I have two scene captures now. This one is a generic one that can be kind of used for anything, but it still carries the same optimizations that the optic one does, but it's a little more friendly for use outside of it. The optic, this one carries with it basically it's built for, well, optics. So you have magnification, you have settings to control your zoom, you have settings to control your zero, and all that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and position it approximately where guy, that little circle is going to be. So that's just a tad, that's pretty good. I'm just going to move it just to the front of the bell, right there. So our scene capture is placed. Now, in order to aim with it, we are going to want to set up our aim socket. So just like before, we're going to go to our socket manager, add a socket, and it's going to be s_aim. And then we can go ahead and move it into position, make sure that it's using X for the forward and Z up, and then position it again as close as we can to being in line with that circle. I really need to make that not an emissive material because that's a little bright now, but that'll be on the to-do list. So we have our aim socket. Okay, once we have those two, the very last thing we're going to want to do, and I'll actually show you here in a second. Well, actually, I'll leave it up. I'll just give you an example here when we actually get to it. Never mind. We're going to go ahead and give it a mesh tag. So if here in the details, if we search for tag, we're going to give it a component tag of skg attachment. And that's just so the attachment system knows which is the actual part that it needs to interact with. So whenever you do something like get mesh, it'll get whichever mesh has this attachment or this tag. Now that we have our actual optics set up, we need to add it to our firearm. So let's load up our M4, go to our attachment site, and here you can see it is being driven by a data asset. So what we want to do is we want to make our own data asset and then set our own default attachment. And then I'll show you how to set up the preview. So to make this easier, I'm going to start and delete this site. And we're going to add, if we search for attachment, a skg attachment. And I'm going to just name it the same thing. So attachment underscore site, make it easier to categorize, and position it roughly in there. So here we need to add some possible attachments. So what all can attach to it? And as you can see, it's a data asset. So let's create our data asset. I don't know why I keep going back and forth. I'm just not used to that. So we're going to right click, go to miscellaneous, select data asset, and here we want to search for attachment. And here you'll see primary data asset, attachment compatibility. Select that. I'm going to name this one DA underscore tutorial. Let's do, I guess we'll just call it site. Open that up. We're going to add an element. And here we have our actor class. So in this case, it's going to be the tutorial scope, like so. So go ahead and save it and add that now as our data asset for our M4. So all of our index 0, our possible attachments. So this will allow us to now have the tutorial site, basically our tutorial scope, as a possible part that can be spawned here. So I'm going to make this the default attachment as well, so it goes ahead and spawns it. So, like so, when I hit play, you can see it is now there and attached. However, it is not positioned very, actually I got pretty daggone close to where I wanted it. So we want to adjust a little bit. How can we do that without, just positioning it blindly and testing? Well, I set up a preview system that should really help. So if I change the display attachment index to 0, here you can see the optic now appears. So from here, you can move it kind of however you wish. So in my case, I'm going to move it, I'll just move it and butt it up against the rear sight. I guess it doesn't really matter too much. And height-wise, yeah, height and everything's fine. I'm just going to save. So when I hit play, there you go, we're pretty much good to go, but you see a problem. We're still using the reticle, or the set site socket material. If we head over to our scope, you just go to class defaults. Here we have, back under our settings, we have a section for reticle settings. So here we have reticle materials. Let's go ahead and give it a reticle material. So in our case, we're just going to do the ATACR. So ATACR reticle, that's just one of the examples that's already complete. And when I aim now, I just realized I goofed. There's something I want to point out really quick. So if you recall, element 0, so basically index 0 of the materials, is the glass material. So that's where we did our set site socket on. we want to make sure we set our reticle material index to match that. So by default it's 1, but our sight socket, so our glass, basically any material that we want to have our reticle be rendered onto, is 0 in this case. So we want to set that to be 0. And compile. And now, here we go. We just had that little bug of, that would be the rendering of the front sight popping in, I guess, when we look at certain angles. So yeah, it just looks like it's vertical, I guess. Yeah. Oh well. Deal with that at another point. So now we just have the problem of, in my opinion, I kind of like the distance of it, but I want to show you how to control the distance away from the optic. And then we're going to also work on the material itself. So under camera settings, here we have camera distance and use fixed camera distance. So these are they work separately and together. So here's how far away I am by default. If I change the camera distance to, let's say, 5, here I am farther away. Now, let's say I go into my attachments. I can't drag it. Let me, crap, and I can't really give you a good example because that's not set up yet either. But what I can do is you can control how far and how close you are from the optic with that setting. Now, if you leave use fixed camera distance unchecked, as you can read from the comment there, it'll basically, if you enable it, it'll lock you at a specific distance from the optic no matter where the optic is on the firearm. So for example, here we have the camera distance at 5. And I will go ahead and here, 5, 10, 15, 20, I'll move it forwards really far. When I aim, the optic is even farther away from me. But if I go through and I enable use fixed camera distance, and then I aim, as you can see, even though it's, well, on the handguard, I'm still able to see as intended. Granted, I'm a little close. So I want to move this back. And I want to set the camera distance, we'll just set it to, we'll do -3. So it kind of works backwards when this is enabled. So that gives us a good distance away, and no matter where it is, so even if I slide it stupidly far, I still aim at the same point. So I'm still the same distance away. Now I want to tweak let's say I want to tweak the reticle a little bit. So I don't like the eyeshadow. So let's say I think the eyeshadow is a little too small. Well, what I can do is I can go to my reticle. I'm going to go ahead and just copy it and paste it in the tutorial section. And we're going to rename it from ATACR to tutorial scope. Open that on up. And we're going to change our optic to use it. So tutorial scope reticle. And now we're using this guy. So here we can change kind of our information for the eye box. So in my case, I just want to make the eye box a little bit bigger. So I want to change it from 100 to 150. That should open it up pretty much all the way. Like so. I just have a tiny bit of the eye box showing at the sides. Let's say I wanted to bump it up to where, screw it, let's make it small. So here you'll really kind of see the difference. So you can see there's the eye box now. It has shrunk a good bit, but we're going to leave it at 150. So it just barely shows around the edge. Like so. And then you can go through and you can kind of tweak it. So you can control how the eye box looks around its edges, so how sharp it is. So by default it's 5. So you can see it's got a little bit of a smoothness to it. And if we bump that up to like something stupid high, like 50, you can see it's a very sharp edge. So again, something to just play around with. And then we have our magnification. So currently I'm only at 1 power. I can't zoom in or anything. So let's set up some, well, magnification. So if we click on our scene capture, let's head over to this optic and I want to see. So it starts at 3 and we end at 20 power. And then I'm going to assume this is a second focal plane optic based upon this dot. Oh wait, never mind. That dot would be for what magnification you're on. I don't see any markings indicating. second focal plane at a specific, or reticle being specific at a set magnification. But we're going to go to magnifications. Here we're at 1 power. We're just going to do 3, 8, and 20. So 3, 8, and 20. So now when I go to aim, you can see I'm zoomed in at 3 power. And if I hold down Alt and zoom in with my mouse, I'm at 8 power. And now I'm at 20 power. And I can go in and out as I please. So here you can kind of tweak it. And then if you want to control the zoom settings, you can enable smooth zoom. So it's, well, smooth. Duh. So as I zoom in, as you can see, it kind of smoothly goes to each individual setting. And those are all things you can tweak in the amount. So like, how smooth do you want it to be? And what speed do you want it to be? Okay, so that pretty much sums up the tutorial scope. Now let's quickly set up the red dot. We should be able to do that super quick. So I'm going to just duplicate my tutorial scope. Or they changed the duplicate key? Yes, they did. So we're going to name this one tutorial red dot. Open that on up. We're going to delete the scene capture and change our mesh out here. This is going to be the red dot. Crap, what in the world did they call it before? Oh, T4 site. All right, so T4 site, like so. Now we want to rotate it. So let's give ourselves a, let's see. Oh, what is it? A scene component. And we're going to make the scene component the root. Then we're going to grab our static mesh and rotate it by 90 degrees. So now we want to go to our site here. We're going to add a socket, s_aim, and we're going to do the exact same thing and set the reticle. So here's the dot, which has almost no depth. So we're going to set that to the site socket. Too many Christmas, that's tiny. We're going to rotate it as well, again, just like before. So we want it to match. Right, actually, that is correct. Make sure I didn't rotate it out. Okay, we're good. So we're going to position it pretty close to that dot. So about there. I'm just ever so slightly high, but that's fine. Save it. And just make sure that this still has the tag, which it does. Now we want to set the reticles. So we know that the index 1 is going to be the site. So that's where the reticle is going to be. So we're going to change out the reticle material. We're going to use the hollow site. And I named it EOTech. Okay, then we're going to save. We're going to go to our data asset, add an element, and this one's going to be our tutorial red dot. Now back in our M4, we're going to change the default to be our tutorial red dot. So here we hit play, should be there. I set the wrong material, I think. Tutorial red dot. Yep, reticle material index. We want to set that back to 1 because that is the index that's being used. And there we go. And now we can aim with our red dot. So I do not like that we're using a fixed position. So let's quickly change that. So we're going to go to our camera settings and just set these both back to default. And now it's pushed out a little far. So we're going to give it a camera distance of 3 to start with. So we're a little bit closer. Sorry, wrong direction. -3. All right, still just a little. Actually, that's not too bad because I forgot because it's sitting out there in front a good bit. But there we have our red dot. Now I'm going to quickly set it up so I can switch between materials. So I'm going to set another material, just like so. We're going to add another one. And this one's going to be the EOTech green. And by default, it'll just work. So if I press M, I switch between red and green reticles. But we are good to go. We now have a red dot and, well, a sight or an magnified optic. So I know this went on for a little while. I really wanted to kind of explain and show the whole process and every single thing. But really, like once you have one done, you can just duplicate, change the mesh, position the scene capture, and you're done. Or in the case of red dots, you literally can just duplicate and you don't have to do anything. So that's going to cover those. And in the next video, we are going to use, let's see, what else is there? We'll set up the suppressor. That should be another one that's very quick. So I will see you in the next video.